Hello, ladies and gentlemen, TJ here, back with a brand new video. So my first video was about a book haul, where I got 3 classics and 7 Stephen King books. This thing always goes into focus. I need to edit this out when I'm editing the video. Well, basically that video was about books. This video is about movies. Once again, just like how my channel was a couple months ago, this will be mainly a booktube channel. But here and there I'm going to do some things that aren't exactly booktube and just go with it, like movie videos. They're probably what we'll be getting most when I'm not doing book videos. It'll mainly probably be movies. But that's a whole complicated song to get into. We're not doing that today. On today's video, we are doing a movie ranking of Marvel, and today I am going to be ranking all of the live-action Spider-Man movies from worst to best. Now, for this video, I will be ranking all 3 of the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, both of the Amazing Spider-Man movies starring Andrew Garfield, all 3 of the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, and both of the Venom movies. I have not seen Morbius yet, but when I see it, I might get a movie review out, and why not? When I see Morbius, I might do an updated Spider-Man movie ranking. Now, this is not featuring 2018 Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, not only because I don't like that movie that much, but because it's not live action. This is all a 100% cinematic ranking. So there are definitely spoilers ahead. Definitely spoilers ahead. So if you've not seen these movies, go and watch them and then come back for this video. And without further ado, let's get into the ranking. By the way, since I have not seen 2022's Morbius yet, feel free to do a spoiler-free review in the comments down below and share your opinion on Morbius. Alright, on with the video. Now, for some of these, specifically 2, I will not be holding up DVD cases, which is what I'll be doing when I'm talking about the said movie. Because for Venom Let There Be Carnage and Spider-Man No Way Home, I don't have DVD copies of them. But all the others in this ranking, I do. So with that being said, coming in last place is Spider-Man Far From Home, released in 2019. In my opinion, this is the only Spider-Man movie that is actually not a good movie. Like, the gap between Spider-Man Far From Home and the next movie on this list, which is like second worst, is like, it's hundreds of thousands of miles worth of a gap. Like, I love every other Spider-Man movie. Spider-Man Far From Home is just bad in my opinion. First off, this doesn't feel like a proper Spider-Man movie. Even Homecoming felt like a Spider-Man movie. This one felt more like a let's grieve about Iron Man for 2 hours straight kind of movie. I'm so sick of hearing about how Tony Stark's dead and it's really messed Peter Parker up. I'm sick of that. I'm sick of the MCU kind of milking Tony Stark's death for all it's worth, especially with the movie that came after his death. I mean, just, you've killed Tony Stark, let him die, and let characters like Spider-Man and the rest of the Avengers just move on. That's the complete opposite of what this movie did, and the decimation, aka Thanos' snap, was referred to as the blip. The blip. That's gotta be the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It's called the snap, the decimation. Call it the awesome, badass names that everyone should call them, not the stupid blip. I mean, even in Spider-Man No Way Home, when Doctor Strange says that he's no longer Sorcerer Supreme because he blipped for 5 years, you could tell he hated that kind of reference to the snap. But I hate it even more, and I just want to punch this movie right in the face because they did something like that. Yeah. The villain is cool. Jake Gyllenhaal is actually pretty good casting as Mysterio, but I just feel like some people could have done it better. I feel like how he's also another villain who's been screwed over by Tony Stark and it's made him go crazy and become a villain. I'm sick of that song. I absolutely hate it when MCU villains go, oh, I was influenced by Tony Stark, now I'm an asshole. That kind of thing. I'm sick of that. I am sick of that. I mean, come on. Spider-Man needs a villain in the MCU, not picked up from other universes, that isn't influenced by Tony Stark. He needs something like that. We need an MCU Kraven the Hunter or Venom. Tom Hardy's Venom isn't influenced by Tony Stark, barely even knows who the guy is. Let's do some of that, Marvel. Please, just do some of that instead of going, oh, Tony Stark, where? Tony Stark's death is sad, yes, but his death was 3 goddamn years ago, and it's almost a year worth of a gap between the story of Avengers Endgame and Far From Home. And Peter's still bragging about Tony Stark's death. Well, Peter, just move on, mate. But long story short, Spider-Man Far From Home, released in 2019, in my opinion, is the only bad Spider-Man movie. It feels more like an Iron Man movie, and Iron Man's dead in it. He's not even in it. I mean, this movie, Spider-Man Homecoming, it feels more like a Spider-Man movie, and Iron Man is in something like 5 or 6 scenes of the film. I bet you, ladies and gentlemen, were thinking that this movie was going to be at the bottom, but keep in mind, just because it's second worst doesn't mean that it's bad. I actually love this movie. I love most things about this movie. It is at this bottom spot because I just prefer the other movies a bit more, just a little bit more. And keep in mind, once again, this spot on this list is hundreds of thousands of miles better than Far From Home. And I'm giving it to 2014's The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Rise of Electro. This movie's actually really good. I do like it. There is a problem that I have with it, and it is the casting of Harry Osborn, Dane DeHaan. He's a good Harry when he's not the Goblin, but when he is the Goblin, he is quite a crappy character. And that's the sad thing, because Dane DeHaan is actually a very talented actor, just not in this. Electro is awesome as a villain in this movie. My family doesn't think too nice of Electro in TASM 2, but I absolutely love the character. Rhino, that's someone that everyone tends to hate. I actually kind of like Rhino because of how goofy and kind of stupid he is. And this movie is a ballsy superhero movie doing something like killing, out of all superheroes, Spider-Man's love interest, Gwen Stacy. This movie has balls doing that. Just having Gwen fall from a massive height inside of a clock tower, Peter shoots his web, it catches up, but at the last second, the web straightens out, she bangs her head on the ground after falling like about 400 feet. That's a very ballsy and risky move, and I feel like people who are fans of Spider-Man and even fans of the TASM franchise, I feel like they don't give this movie enough credit for having stakes like that. And can I just say that Andrew Garfield has the best Spider-Man swinging out of all 3 actors. He does such a wild and gangly kind of swing when he's on his webs in these movies, and it is absolutely badass. He is a good Spider-Man. I actually prefer him more than Tom Holland, especially after watching another movie on this list, Spider-Man No Way Home. And yeah, he's such a good Spider-Man, such a good Peter Parker. People say he's way too cool to be Peter Parker. I actually don't think that. Each Spider-Man and each Peter Parker has a different story, and a unique thing about them. And the fact that this Peter Parker is actually kind of cool but awkward at the same time, it actually really well suits this franchise. I'm probably going to get a fair bit of hate for this, but in the next spot is 2017's Spider-Man Homecoming. Okay, so let's talk about the villain straight up. Vulture, played by Michael Keaton, who was not a good Batman, in my opinion. And in my opinion, the movie Birdman is awful. He is a good Vulture. He is a pretty interesting villain and a pretty interesting superhero slash supervillain for a change. His Batman sucks. But, the fact that Vulture is also screwed over by Tony Stark just pisses me off. I don't think it's really that cool for Vulture, out of all villains, Vulture, to be just some everyday bloke who looks a lot like Batman, gets screwed over by Iron Man. But it actually kind of works for this movie because it's a first Spider-Man movie at a time where Tony Stark is alive. When he dies in the MCU, do not do the exact same thing with this piece of work of a 2-hour-long bore-fest, snore-fest, an absolute crap-fest of a movie. It's okay to do it in this one, though, because Tony Stark's alive and Peter Parker, well, it's his first movie. The Avengers are still around. It's before the events of Infinity War, so it's fine in my books. By the way, he is actually really good as Spider-Man in this movie. He's great. Birdman, Vulture. Vulture is, he's good in this movie too, yeah. Zendaya does a good job at playing, Michelle Jones. Jacob Batalon as Ned Leeds. He's actually a pretty cool MCU friend of Spider-Man, rather than in the comics where I'm pretty sure he's a friend of Miles Morales. Or is that Gon K. Lee? No, that's Gon K. Lee. That's right, Ned Leeds is the Hobgoblin at one point in the comics, like a substitute Hobgoblin. But he is a good MCU friend of Peter Parker, replacing Harry Osborn. But when I was watching Spider-Man Homecoming for the first time in 2018, I actually thought that Ned Leeds was Harry Osborn, and I got around the schools that I was in for the next, half a year, 6 or 7 months, saying that Jacob Batalon is actually a good Harry Osborn. No wonder I got picked on for that at the start of 2019. But overall, Homecoming's a good movie, and I would re-watch this on most days. Spider-Man Far From Home, if I decide to do a Marvel movie marathon, I'm going to have to watch it at some point again, straight after Endgame or maybe WandaVision, and I don't want to do that, but I'm going to have to, and that's going to be a drag. Okay, so next up is a movie I don't really remember that much, 2018's Venom. Now, it's alright, it's okay. I think Carlton Drake, aka The Riot, is actually a riot, of a villain in this movie. Really suits the overall tone, and the tone itself, it's all over the place. 1 minute it's horror, then it's comedy, then it's some sort of romantic thing with Tom Hardy and what's her name as his ex-wife. And it makes for a good movie, a comedic, fun, in moments scary movie, and that's my kind of movie sometimes, most times. I feel like Tom Hardy is actually a really good Venom, and if only we saw more of him than just a minute and a half in No Way Home. I'm not going to stay on this movie for long because I do not remember it, so let's move on to the next film. Next up is The Amazing Spider-Man 1, released in 2012. Now, this is a great movie. I like the Lizard as the villain. Reese Ifans does a fantastic job at playing him, playing Dr. Kurt Connors. Emma Stone, fantastic Gwen Stacy, really, really suits Gwen Stacy. She does. Andrew Garfield, fantastic Spider-Man. Good Peter Parker as well. I will fight you in the comments section for that. Dennis Leary, he's okay at playing Captain Stacy. I do think Farmer Hoggett does do a better job in Spider-Man 3, the third Tobey Maguire movie. Farmer Hoggett, if you don't know him, watch Babe. But he still does a reasonably good job. The fact that like the first 20 minutes of this movie focuses on a 5-year-old Peter Parker or a 4-year-old Peter Parker, his parents show up for cameos, I thought that was kind of unique. Martin Sheen as Uncle Ben, he's my favourite Uncle Ben. He's really smart with his words. Not as smart as Cliff Robertson, I believe his name is, who plays him in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man trilogy, Sam Raimi trilogy. But he gets his point across a bit better, and his death scene was a bit more emotional to me because basically the last thing Peter said to this variant's Uncle Ben is basically like, it was basically a hate comment towards him and he stormed out. And if he didn't do that, Uncle Ben would still be alive, but no, he died. Whereas Peter, in the Raimi trilogy, the Tobey Maguire trilogy, he still badmouths Uncle Ben, but that night after Uncle Ben had been shot, they had kind of forgiven each other. That's not really something that 100% happens in the TASM movies. And it just strikes me as a little bit more heartbreaking. Fantastic movie overall, could watch this any day. I watched it very recently and it made me like it so much more. Maybe could have even punched it up into my top 3 favourite Spider-Man movies or top 4. But no, it is still down here. Okay, now we have officially reached top 5. Let's do this. In number 5 spot, I am going to have to give it to 2021's Venom: Let There Be Carnage. Now, this is a good movie. I feel like Woody Harrelson kills it wearing that very distracting wig as Cletus Cassidy, aka Carnage. Shriek in this movie is kind of annoying. Like, I was really hoping Venom would just bite her head off. That cop as well, played by the guy from Suicide Squad, Ice Barinholtz or whatever his name is. I was really, really hoping for him to die, and he does. Carnage's death was pretty cool. I thought that was sick. What's her name returning as Venom's love interest was pretty good in this movie. Not as good as in the first movie though, in my opinion. Tom Hardy still kills it as Eddie Brock. Venom, that symbiote's the big thing with this movie and the previous one. And I loved the post-credits scene where we got a cameo from Tom Holland's Spider-Man from the MCU when Venom was sucked into the MCU by Doctor Strange's wavy make everyone forget who I am spell. I thought that was awesome. The fact that Venom kind of knew who he was in some weird way and licked the TV after he paused it on Tom Holland's Spider-Man. It was really setting something up for No Way Home. And then they didn't even unite. In No Way Home, I nearly said Home Alone. If No Way Home was Home Alone, I would hate that movie. Like in No Way Home, all you see is he gets drunk, gets sent back to the Sonyverse, and a little bit of the Venom symbiote gets left behind in the post-credit scene. But overall for Venom: Let There Be Carnage, good movie. I love it. It does do a good job with the villain, better than in the first movie by a long shot, and overall just a better movie. Number 4, we are getting very serious with our ranking. But in number 4 spot, I'm going to give it to 2004's Spider-Man 2. Now, Doc Ock's a cool villain. My sister loves Doc Ock as a villain, but in this movie, he is pretty cool. All sorts of stuff. This is probably the movie in the trilogy that I remember the least, so it's going to be hard to say things about it. Alfred Molina as Otto Octavius, aka Doc Ock. Fantastic villain. Not the best. Has a couple of flaws. But he is a good villain. Really suits this sequel. When Peter loses his powers for a little bit, it's kind of funny, very goofy. And not goofy as in bad. I feel like when people say goofy these days, it means bad. I mean like goofy as in fun, hip kind of stuff. And rewatching this a few months ago made me realise how much I hate Mary Jane Watson. Yeah, Peter probably should have left her at the river with Doc Ock. Or better yet, probably easier to have just saved the kids in the first movie. God, she's an awful woman in this trilogy. She's terrible. She's terrible. But, I like the kind of horror type feeling that you get when Doc Ock is unconscious in the hospital and the arms come to life and start taking control and kill all sorts of doctors. That is kind of a scary, scary scene. And the train catch. That is such a brilliant moment in this movie. The train catch scene is probably the best scene in the entire trilogy. Mainly just because you realise how powerful this Peter Parker variant is with his abilities, his powers. You see just how powerful he can be and how strong he can be to the point that he saves a train with like 200 people inside. And that train wasn't slowing down in the slightest until Peter saved their butts. I can guarantee you that. They were gonna die if Spider-Man was literally a second too late with anything. And then how Harry found out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man is just chef's kiss level fantastic scene. And when Doc Ock dies, it is emotional. It is actually emotional when Octavius bites the big one and goes underwater with his machine. Okay, we're moving into the top 3. Finally, it has been 25 minutes of recording this video. So, in number 3 spot, I'm going to have to give it to 2007's Spider-Man 3. The only reason it's this high is because Sandman's awesome, the new Goblin is great. The overall tone of the movie changes and I really like that, and the classic blues music and the dancing to it on the street. That's got to be the best part of this movie, and if you don't believe me, just watch the scene for yourself. Watch the movie for yourself a few times over and try and prove me wrong then. You probably could millions of times, but you're not going to change my mind on how fantastic Spider-Man 3 is. Everything about this movie is good. Even Venom, he is good in this movie. Topher Grace, not the best casting, but hey, still suitable for the Tobey trilogy with how exactly Venom was portrayed. And in this one, MJ is just as selfish and just as much of a as ever. I made sure I muted myself while I said that word. But in this one, the stakes are pretty high because in it, Spider-Man very nearly dies. And Spider-Man gets turned into a bit of a jerk. Like not a bit of a jerk, a massive jerk. When he has the symbiote within him. When he is bonded with the symbiote, it's some of the best, most menacing, most sinister stuff Spider-Man has ever gotten up to. And it really makes for a third movie. I wish they made a 4th and 5th installment, maybe a 6th like they had planned. But we didn't get that, and we most likely never will. A man can dream though. Coming in at the number 2 spot, released in 2002, Spider-Man 1. Now, Willem Dafoe, holy crap, that man can act as a freaking horrifying powerhouse. That laugh is absolutely menacing and sinister and kind of almost demonic in a way. How he lets out that evil cackle when he's on that gorgeous glider in that epic armor and that epic helmet. It really suits the tone of the movie too, because if you look outside the goofiness, the Spider-Man trilogy does actually have horror elements in it. Especially in this movie and Spider-Man 2. This is good in many different ways. 2002's Spider-Man. The swinging, looking back after seeing No Way Home and all that, and even the Venom movies, the swinging is probably the best that like PS2 cutscene level special effects could make back in 2002. But hey, I actually like movies that don't have the best visual effects, like sort of like The Lord of the Rings, how some shots in that look, you can tell that they are very badly green screened and added in with heaps of CGI. But in a way, it kind of makes it look almost more realistic. And it does the same with this movie when Spidey's swinging, or the goblins on the glider, and stuff like that, and I absolutely love it. This movie is just a very pleasing kind of movie. But we all know what the number one spot is. 2021 Spider-Man No Way Home. Oh my god, that is such a brilliant movie. Everything about it is awesome. Toby, Andrew and Tom, how they team up and there's awesome chemistry between the three Spider-Man actors. It makes for a very wholesome, nostalgic movie. It really made me think of when I was younger, back in 2012, when I was all over the Tobey Maguire movies and the first Andrew movie. Loved them with all of my heart. Even the second Andrew movie, first Tom Holland movie, and the MCU as a whole. I wanted something like Tobey, Andrew and Tom to join for a movie, but I never thought it would happen, and I thought it was impossible to happen. Into the Spider-Verse gave me a bit of hope, but then I was thinking, nah, those two franchises, TASM and the Raimi trilogy, got cancelled mid-franchise, so I'm not gonna pray for any hope of seeing them again. And No Way Home proved me wrong and gave me the movie of my dreams. This is my number one favourite movie of all time. The villains are all back. Everything. When Andrew came through the portal, on first watching, I made sure I was silent. Silent as a mouse. I nearly failed, and when Toby came through, I was just laughing and laughing and laughing. And they did the pointing meme, like Ned asks Peter, and they all get up. And they go, oh, sorry, did you mean, Peter? Andrew does the freaking, that. Peter Parker, they're still pointing, and when Ned asks for the computer, Tom is still pointing like that. Toby's still pointing, and Andrew's still just like that. It makes for such a cool scene, and the meme was complete. And when Aunt May died, that was terrible. That was just heartbreaking. Tom Holland's Spidey didn't need to go through MJ dying. Aunt May. Not MJ, Aunt May. But during the final fight, when MJ falls off the scaffolding and Tom goes after her, he nearly catches her, but the glider swoops in and gets him. And then Andrew dives down and saves MJ, redeeming himself from letting Gwen die. That's such an awesome scene, and I was cheering on both viewings. Back to the Andrew and Toby entrances. On second viewing, I made sure I was still silent for Andrew. And then when Toby entered, and about 2 minutes before Toby entered, I was just moving all over the room that I was watching the film in my living room, and I was grunting with excitement. I was jumping around like an idiot because my favourite Spider-Man, one of my favourite superhero actors and my favourite superhero of all time, was going to make a return. And Daredevil's cameo. That is a good scene where he's a really good lawyer and he makes sure that none of the charges against Peter stick, and then Happy Hogan's in trouble. He advises for him to get a lawyer. A brick comes through the window behind him and he catches it with complete ease, and Spidey's spider sense goes off and he goes to catch it too. He asks, "How did you just do that?" And then Daredevil, played by Charlie Cox, replies with, "I'm a really good lawyer." I thought that was awesome. I haven't seen the Netflix shows, can't yet. I'm 15, not 18. But, wow, man. That was such a cool scene because I know who Charlie Cox's Daredevil is. He's Daredevil, goddammit, he's cool. And it was really good to see him again, even if it was just for a cameo. I feel like Beneficial Cucumber, Benedict Cumberbatch, does a good job at playing Doctor Strange in this. The Wong cameo is pretty goofy but pretty fun. Doctor Strange, he does fantastic in the scenes that he's in, really sets him up for Multiverse of Madness. And then the final fight when Peter's just railing the Goblin on top of Cap's destroyed shield because he killed Aunt May. That is such a good scene. He's about to impale the Goblin straight through the face with the glider, and Toby steps in, saving him instead of letting him die again. And then Toby gets stabbed. Upon first viewing of that, half my family, because the other half wasn't there at that time, they were travelling, their jaws just dropped and I just straight up screamed. I screamed. But then he was okay. He was okay. Thank God. Upon second viewing, my mother and I both knew what was happening. My father, he kind of reacted with a bit of a groan when Toby got stabbed. I mean, come on, Toby very nearly died. And then the final spell where Doctor Strange has to erase everyone's memories of who Peter Parker is, except for Toby and Andrew, because they're all sent back, and the villains, same thing. But everyone has to forget who Peter Parker is, and that is actually pretty sad. And in the end, Tom Holland's Spider-Man realizes that MJ and Ned are probably better off without him in their lives. The final swing in the comic accurate suit with Toby and Andrew's suits taken for inspiration. Fantastic closer to the movie. The credits roll. We get Venom at a bar drunk off his nut. And he gets sent back to his universe, the Sonyverse, but some of the symbiote is left behind. And then there's a trailer for Multiverse of Madness. Super hyped. Haven't seen that yet. Been hearing nothing but bad reviews about that movie, really. But who knows? And just like that, that is my ranking of all of the Spider-Man movies that I've seen, from worst to best. Now, remember, this is no definitive list. It is just the list of some random teenager who lives in Australia and just loves Spider-Man. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell to be notified every time I upload a brand new video. And I will see you in the next one, ladies and gents. But until next time, read some books and watch some Spider-Man. Why not? And take care.